do not have an evaluation, can you give me a hand that's for this workshop from us? It looks like this. So we need a few back there. I'll come around and get those. And then we're really excited to have our third opportunity this morning for some of us to hear a little bit more from Dr. Alan Berkowitz. This presentation this afternoon is on fostering collaboration, and we're looking forward to seeing what might be next. So please join me in welcoming back Alan Berkowitz.
Hello again.
Hello.
So it's like we're working different pieces of the puzzle because it's a big picture with many pieces. So this one is about collaboration. Because let's assume that everyone in the room is doing great things and is really passionate about this. Like I said about pushing the car out of the snow, if you're not all pushing at the same time, you might be really strong, but you wouldn't be producing a collective impact. So we want to produce a collective impact, and I always love talking to you all because I have great examples. So Thomas and I were talking because Thomas is a supervisor in Adult Protective Services, so he's dealing with a lot of cases. And I'm talking about what are the scenarios for bystander intervention? What are the warning signs? What are the triggers? Who are the bystanders could intervene? And he has like a zillion great stories. They're not great stories, but they're great for this purpose. But if he only stays in his office, right, he could write the best annual report in the world and get all kinds of awards from his piece of the puzzle, but he's not helping me, and he could help me so much. So it's like, how do we circulate around and share what we all know so that we can help all each other see the big picture and give each of us the information that we need to be better at what we do. And I really need Thomas in this case because, you know, in the sexual assault prevention field, I started going to a conference where there are a lot of cops, and there are a lot of lawyers and advocates, or even forensic nurse examiners. And like, that helped me understand prevention so much, because they were all dealing with the stories. So that's really what we talk about when we're talking about collaboration. And since this is a smaller group, please feel free to raise your hand or ask a question or give an example. As I said, most of this is based on what's happening in the sexual assault prevention field, where they have really good collaborative efforts, which it seems to be you have here in Syracuse, and they're what are called sexual assault response teams in communities. And the government, this is what we need for elder abuse. Because in sexual assault, the government has been funding these teams to be developed. And they have law enforcement, they have legal, they have medical, they have all the people sitting around the table. Well, nobody's giving you all any money for that yet, right? So we need to get that money. So you start doing that, even if you're doing it already, with more support and resources.
They are actually starting to fund.
They're starting, great. So the question would be, to what extent do you know about each other's efforts? So if Thomas has all these great stories, but he doesn't know what I'm doing, he doesn't know that he can help me out, right? With his stories that would help me identify the warning signs and the bystander triggers. Do you talk to each other regularly? Do you collaborate on programs that use a common framework? So for example, you can approach almost any issue from a bystander perspective or a social norms perspective. So if different agencies with different populations are using common frameworks, you're mutually reinforcing each other. Whereas if one agency is using fear, you have to find a way to have a conversation with them without putting them on the defensive, because they're doing that because they really care, but they might not know that it doesn't work. As opposed to all of us gossiping, all of you gossiping about what I'm doing that you think isn't any good, as opposed to somebody having a conversation with me. So you strive to be proactive, which is what prevention is all about. Now, I'll just keep using you as an example, Thomas, because I appreciate the conversation. Anyway, he's an old timer, so he's amused. So, because he worked in Child Protective before even this. So, if Thomas knows what I'm doing and we have opportunities to talk to each other, he has an opportunity to provide me, share with me things that he knows that could help me. And then we need to have a common framework, because maybe in some of the response situations, you're not evaluating the cases from a prevention point of view and saying, who were the bystanders, who could have been, who knew, who could have said something to someone. But if you take back time to work the case backwards, there's a great sexual assault prevention video where it's like a stereotypical situation. This young woman goes to a party, there's alcohol, this guy offers to take her home, and in the end, it's like an assault that's going to happen. But then they run the whole video backwards, and they show at each point there were the bystanders. And then they have a discussion about how those bystanders could have intervened. So how do we do that for elder abuse? And what is the collective knowledge that we all have together that would allow us to do that? And are we sitting down together and doing that? That's what I'm talking about, is collaboration. So obviously we need data. Sometimes we talk to people who are in denial about the problem, and then we need to go out and get the right data and come back and give them the data to push it to another step. Do we include a broad range of community members on your team? I know that you're doing that here in Syracuse, but in general. You have a community-wide task force such as the ones you have. So, if we look at a comprehensive program, we have policies, procedures, and enforcement. So there's a law, it's implemented, and people are hopefully busted when they break the law. That's important. Mm-hmm. We have services for victims. No question, right? So we're already doing that to a large extent with elder abuse, but are we doing prevention and risk reduction? And as I said in the last session, but some of you might have been there, if you teach someone to reduce their risk, like there are successful workshops that teach women self-defense, how to identify perpetrators, how to identify risky situations, how to handle them, and to not blame yourself if you get assaulted. And the women who take that workshop are less likely to get assaulted. Very good statistics. So that's called the risk reduction workshop. But if this side of the room has the workshop and sexual assaults go down, they're the same over here. And if I can't get away with it over here, I'll get away with it over here. So risk reduction is not prevention, but we still have a moral obligation to provide risk reduction for the populations that are at risk. Does that make sense? But it's not prevention. Like what Adult Protective Services is doing is not prevention, but it's absolutely necessary. But if we really had good collaboration, it could fuel prevention. So a successful program is comprehensive. That means it involves all the key parties. So if I'm asked to present to athletes, I always ask to talk to the coaches. If you do work in the elementary school, you need to find a way to engage or inform the parents. So what is comprehensive for elder abuse? I'm thinking out loud, it would involving the neighborhood. It would involving the gatekeepers. It would involving the financial sector. And it would involve giving non-confidential information to people to arouse their suspicion. So in case you weren't in the last session, what's your name?
Taylor Hazard.
Taylor gave a great example of she's a caretaker and she might notice things and how could she, some of it might be confidential. And so we gave the example, if I'm the caretaker for my mom and Taylor notices that I'm spending a lot of money and I got a new car and I all of a sudden have a fancy nice watch and I'm dressing better, and then my brother comes to visit my mother, she can't say something that my mother told her in confidence, but she could say to my brother, Adam, did Alan get a new job? Seems like he has a lot more money in his pocket. And he goes, no, he has the same job as before. And you say, that's interesting, because yesterday he drove up in a new car. And so like she's planting suspicion in my brother's mind, but she's not violating any confidentiality. And then my brother says to me, hey Alan, what's going on? And I get all defensive, and then he gets suspicious. And then he goes to a workshop where he finds out he has a right to receive my mom's bank statement. So you see how it's all working together. But if we don't talk to each other, it doesn't happen. It's intensive, which means it's sustained over time. And it's interactive when possible. It's relevant, which means it's tailored to the audience. So as we said, different ethnic groups have different belief systems about aging, and we need to tailor our interventions to those populations. It needs to be driven by data, which you don't have a lot of, but needs to be driven, you need to get the data to drive your program. So for instance, if you want to do social norms, you need data about misperceptions. And you should always emphasize the positive. So that's the research on successful programs. So far, so good? So you could just take this slide, only this slide, and you could look at what your outreach programs are doing, and you could say, is it comprehensive, intensive, relative, data-driven, positive message? And it won't all be, because most of us aren't doing things that are what they could be. So prevention is gradual and takes place over time. There's no quick fixes, even though our legislators might want us to fix it quickly. That's another issue, right? Is to train the people we're accountable to have appropriate expectations of what we can do. So if you get a big grant, you don't want someone saying, well, we just gave you $50,000 here. What have you been doing? It's not going to go away with one grant of $50,000. It's elder abuse prevention and response is the responsibility of everyone collaboratively, and then how we do it is just as important as what we do. And collegial relationships and understanding are the building blocks. So far, so good? So remember in the beginning of the keynote I said that elder abuse prevention is a social justice issue, and that there's a research area that looks at the stages of social justice movements. So we can look at that literature and apply it to elder abuse. And I'm going to apply it more to sexual assault prevention, which is a little more evolved. So the later stages build up, but then what's more important is each stage requires different skills, right? So think about the feminist movement or the civil rights movement. In the early stages, the skills were more confrontational and even engaging in civil disobedience, because people were in denial and the problem was invisible. So at a certain point, you need people maybe who are willing to get arrested, or willing to be rude, or willing to do extreme things. And then at a certain point, the problem starts getting the attention, and you need different skills. And we all know people who are still backward. We all know people who are still using the old skills for the new stage, and it doesn't work. So new people join the process. So where are we now, and what skills do we need to move the process forward? And I think collaboration is, from a prevention point of view, is one of the critical ones. So, first we have denial of the problem, so that's when we have the challenges and the confrontational approaches. Then we have recognition of the problem. We have a focus on providing services to victims and enhancing the legal and investigative response. If you look at the military's response to sexual assault, it maps right onto these stages. Like first, all the services started providing tons of money to victim support. Then they started training investigators and training legal people and all that, and then they finally got to the prevention piece, which is where they are now. So you move from being reactive to proactive. Adult protective service is reactive by definition. but how do we be proactive? You know, everyone learned an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Bless you.
If Adult Protective Service is giving a pound of cure, and I start doing an ounce of prevention, it's not going to go away. Maybe after 5 years, it will be 15 ounces. And maybe after 5, in other words, it's a gradual shift. It doesn't happen all at once. But over time, the more you do prevention, the less you need to do response.
Bless you.
Impacting the causes, so what are the causes? And changing the environment. Those are the pieces of prevention. And fostering inclusiveness in prevention and response, which is not only inclusiveness in terms of us collaborating and inclusiveness in identifying other issues, but also inclusiveness in terms of making sure that our services are relevant to all the populations that need our help. And when you get to the later stages, the first stage doesn't go away, but it's more where we're focusing most of our energy. So you all invited me to come because some folks felt that you need to focus now more on expanding the scope to prevention. That's why I'm here. And one day you won't need me. For some reason this PowerPoint doesn't listen to me. Okay. Stages 3 and 4. You need the prevention stage. You need collaboration. You need relationship building. If I'm in stage 1, which is confrontational and adversarial, and we're doing demonstrations and sit-downs, I'm not trying to build a relationship with you, right? I'm trying to get like the world's attention. Mm-hmm. But now we're sitting on a task force, like in the old days of rape prevention, law enforcement and advocates didn't really get along. And you know, the rape prevention person would come in, the law would say, oh, there's the rape lady. And there's all these stories. It was a little bit adversarial, but now everyone's totally on the same page. Law enforcement totally gets it. They want to solve this problem just as much as anyone else. So you need to build a relationship. You need to manage conflict, because we don't always agree. You need to have facilitation skills. You need to have accurate perceptions. And you need to learn to be allies to each other instead of competing for funding or whatever. And you need to be humble and non-defensive, which I'm sure we all could have more of. So, and you need to recognize your personal issues, because in all these things we have personal issues that bring us to the problem, and there's nothing wrong with that. That must make it better, but sometimes they get in the way. So if you're hiring someone, you have to make sure they have the skills that are needed for the job you want them to do at this moment, which is different than 10 years ago. Or maybe you want one person to be more of an activist, and you have one set of skills, and you want another person to be more collaborative, and you work both at the same time. You might still need more activist skills when you go to Albany and try and change the legislation. But you might need more collaboration skills when you sit on a task force.
She has a question.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you think that this is linear, because my sense when you talk about some of those social justice movements, and you look at just the last couple of years, or 5 years, it seems like we've had to move back to some of the earlier stages because we've recognized that we're not where we thought we were, maybe in terms of.
So I like to think of it more like a spiral.
Yeah.
And the spiral has a slope. So some spirals go like this, where it seems like you go way back and then you go ahead. But if there's unfinished business, then you have to go back. And there's always unfinished business. So it's also like a pendulum. So it's good to have that bigger perspective of how the dynamics work, because when we need to go back to our unfinished business, it's easy to get depressed. And think like, oh, we're not making any progress, but you're making so much progress that all the dirt came out. I mean, did you ever move your refrigerator and see what's under there? Now you can clean it and it's not there, you know, but it's like you never had time. So it's a process.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Yes?
Donna, yes.
I was listening to what you said about collaboration,
Yes.
and when I'm out and about talking in the community, one of the things I talk about is collaborations is important to take away some of the weapons that people use to abuse. For instance, an elderly woman leaving her door unlocked because she can't really hear the doorbell. And she said, well, it's okay, only my family knows, but no telling who her family told. So now the community knows that this woman leaves her door
Right,
unlocked,
and they can come in.
not knowing that there are services available to someone like her that is a flash, you know,
Right.
what,
Right,
that
or
she
like
can
you
carry
go-
around with her.
Thank
But
you.
if we don't talk to each other to say,
That's
well,
the point.
you know,
That's
that
the
this is
perfect-
available. And for instance, I need this person in my life, even though they're ripping me off, because I need them to fill out my checks. But then they don't know there's large print checks, there's check guides, there's other things they can do. But having a collaboration with other people in the community,
So that's
you
a
can tell
perfect-
that person, no, actually, here's something else that can help you where you won't be as vulnerable or whatever, but having a conversation and building relationships
Thank
can
you.
help.
Yeah, so going back to your example, which is really a good one, the person leaves the door unlocked, and many people have different pieces of information. And so, like I have a friend who's deaf, and she was out of the country. She asked me to buy her a special alarm clock that really vibrates. So that's how she wakes up, because she can't hear the alarm, but she can feel the vibration. Well, I never knew about that. So somebody knows the alternative to the doorbell that allows you to lock the door, and somebody else knows. But if everybody's not talking to each other, you don't prevent. And if you don't prevent it, it happens, then you need to debrief it so you think what you could have done that would have prevented it. So maybe there's a great alarm device for hearing impaired people, and the community doesn't know about it, and the hardware stores, Ace, they don't carry it. So it's multifaceted, and you can pick one example like that, which is a great example, and work it from all these different angles, and then come up with a response that is preventive, and not only response. Thank you. Compassion. Like, you could have compassion for the perpetrator, but you don't condone the perpetrator's behavior, because if you really believe that human beings are not born evil, or babies, there's really cool research on very young infants that shows that they're incredibly compassionate and empathic. And they know what's going on. So if we started out good, what happened? So you can have compassion for the perpetrator, but you don't enable or justify their behavior. And compassion for each other when we screw up. Like, I didn't know about the alarm, and you get really worked up on me because you're talking to the person who was ripped off. But then we calm down and we say, okay, what are we going to do differently next time?
I know something I experience a lot, like in talking with different professionals in different sectors, that, people do have different compassion and empathy, and it's even, I feel a responsibility when I'm speaking with somebody to educate them, even have that conversation about compassion and, just passing the message on, because at that point, I would technically be a bystander if, let's say if somebody was in a nursing home and the head nurse wasn't really using a compassionate model in dealing with that client, I think that would serve, as my responsibility to have that conversation and say, where are we at, where are we going, how are you feeling?
Or even if there's a recognition of personal issues, like what upsets you so much about this kind of patient. Now, if you go back to my introduction in the keynote, how we're all programmed to think we have to be physically fit, beautiful, by what standards, right? I mean, why are people dyeing their hair blonde? Because somewhere along the line somebody thought that was more beautiful. Please don't take anything personally, but it's like we're talking about the culture,
Sunday night, it was
right?
purple.
We're talking about the culture.
Came out this way.
So, and like I said, if you were in the last session, we were talking about if you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you're doing it for well thought out reasons, like someone said, I tell my mother to dye her hair because people will treat her with more respect. If that's why you're doing it, that's a good reason. But if you're doing it because you're taught to be ashamed you know, of being old and vulnerable, and we're doing all these things, then I'm going to be compassionate to a person with Alzheimer's, because I'm afraid that one day I'm going to be like that. And I'm going to die, right? Everyone's going to die. We don't deal with death. I mean, I'm not recommending any one religion, but if you're a Buddhist monk or a Hindu monk, they send you to the cemetery, and they ask you to meditate in the cemetery. So like you can work through your issues with death. Right? And we run the other way. So if I'm afraid of it all and I'm not dealing with it and I'm getting a little older, right? Then I'm not going to be compassionate towards a person with Alzheimer's because they're triggering all my fears. So it's we have to really take it personally. And I have no problems with someone dyeing their hair blonde, but I'm talking about larger cultural issues that may or may not apply to individuals.
Isn't that part of that self-care too, for yourself and for the
Totally.
population you're dealing with? Because part of that is dealing with your fears, is that self-care,
Yeah.
how to get over that.
Right, so we need to make time for me to take care of myself, which is for maybe you're my friend and you notice I'm getting triggered all the time, and maybe you have time to sit down with me and say, like, Alan, what do you think of so-and-so? And then you could get to the point where I'm afraid of being like that, and why am I afraid of being like that? And then we could get to the point of, well, how does that affect how I relate to someone who is like that?
Mm-hmm.
So we also need to help each other with our self-care issues. That would be a great collaboration piece that I didn't think of. So everyone is a colleague and a partner. Relationships are just as important as programs and tools, and every negative outcome or failure provides information that we could use to solve the problem. And remember, the PowerPoints are available, so you can all get the handout. So I was on the board of directors of an organization called End Violence Against Women International, which is mainly about sexual assault and domestic violence prevention. And they got a grant from a foundation in Toronto to do some research on collaboration. And we surveyed all the professionals in the field and said, what helps you feel supported? And these are what we found out, that people recognize their roles are different but complementary, understandable, are responsive, value me, respect my relationship with the victim, relieve the victim in his or her story. So we could ask those questions about each other. Do we feel supported? Do we feel respected? Do I feel that you understand my part of the puzzle and why I'm doing what I'm doing? And if the percentages are low, then what do we need to do to make that happen? It's interesting. All the professionals define success, right? Those are all possible outcomes of success. Prosecution and conviction, investigation. Everyone defines success in terms of victim satisfaction. Now, so I'm wondering, in the case of elder abuse, which is very familial, we would certainly say that elder satisfaction is a critical criteria, but I wonder if we could also say family satisfaction with the system. And you would all have to think about is what are the shared outcomes that you all agree you all need to accomplish. So, in elder abuse, we know there's more reasons for people to not want to tell on the abuser. And we know that, for instance, in sexual assault and other issues, there's more disbelief of the victim report. Like in sexual assault, a huge issue is disbelief and belief in false reports. But we still need to remind ourselves that people are almost always telling the truth, and we always start by believing. When someone tells you something, if it's a bystander, a family member, or an elder, you always assume it's true until proven otherwise, and you go forward with the assumption that it's true to find out if it is true. And if someone's being accused, you also have to treat them as innocent until proven guilty. And both of those aren't true at the same time. But you have to assume that I'm innocent until proven guilty, but you believe everything someone told you about me unless you have proof that it's not true. Victim satisfaction is in everyone's interest. Are we clear about what we're trying to do, why we think it will help, and how we will measure it? And we must be accountable to elders and include their input. So I forgot which resource in the other room, but I was checking out all the tables, and some of the tables were providing resources, and they were saying this was developed with the input of elders. Because you can't help someone if they don't think you're helping them, right?
Exactly.
If I want to end racism and I'm not doing things that folks of color think is helping, then I'm not doing what I think I'm doing. In the rape prevention field, there are some well-known popular rape prevention for men programs that on every campus they go, they alienate the advocates. Something's wrong. If you're upsetting the people who are working with the victims, you're doing something wrong, or you just don't have good relationship skills, but something is wrong. So we always need to be accountable to elders who are cognitively able to inform us about what would be helpful to them. So validation of victims is the goal for all, and here's some of the components of that. And in this case, as I said, it may be more familial. So if there's an issue where my brother feels I'm using my mom's money in a way that's unfair, what protocols and confidentiality agreements do you need so you can keep him updated on the progress of the investigation? In real life, my brother has a lot more money than me, so he's much more excited. Okay. So we know what each other are doing. We understand what we're trying to change and how we think we're going to change it. We ensure consistent messages and outcomes. We design multiple programs that are interactive and synergistic across agencies. And as I said, the consistent messages and outcomes is difficult, but if you look at what you all are doing, even if you're addressing different issues or different aspects of the issue, is everyone in some way talking about the role of the bystander? Is everyone in some way talking about when you're concerned, probably other people are concerned even though they don't seem concerned? In other words, it's like when you listen to a symphony, there's a theme and it keeps coming back, and it keeps being repeated throughout the symphony or in a novel. What are the themes that we all want to emphasize as a group that will advance all of our efforts? And obviously, what I'm bringing you is to really think about, in particular, bystander intervention and norms correction. Because those are the two of the most successful prevention strategies we have, and how to combine them and apply them to your issue. Any questions or comments?
I do. I have a comment, actually just a scenario to get your opinion regarding bystander intervention. Scenario, if you are on a central bus transportation and young people are together, they see elder person trying to get on the bus with a walker or a cane, taking their sweet time, taking a hard time to get their money out. Kids talking, I got somewhere to go, this doesn't make any sense, and everyone's on the transportation bus quiet, no one intervenes. What would you have done?
But what I've usually done is what I thought of later, right? But what happens is you keep doing it and then you do it in the moment. So first of all, anonymous situations are the hardest, like public situations. So first of all, I would have to ask, do I feel physically safe? I would probably do an indirection for it. I'd say, are you all in a big rush? Seems like you need to be getting somewhere. And that would probably chill them out right away, because they're probably not in a rush. And I'll say, then I might say, we're going to get there at the same time anyway, because the bus is on the schedule.
Right.
So if she slows them down, the bus driver is going to drive fast. And if you get to the next stop and we're ahead of time, the bus driver's gonna wait longer. In other words, I try and have a conversation, but come in from the side. I'll give you a different example that happened to me, but it's not about elder abuse. But I used to live in Trumansburg, and I would like go get my cup of coffee and walk to the post office, and I could do all my business in like a small area. And I was walking across the parking lot of the supermarket, and some teenagers were in the corner, and they were throwing trash on the ground. And that really pushed my buttons. You could say I had a personal issue at that moment. The guy was pissed off. And I want to go over there and just let them have it. But I knew that wouldn't help. So I walked over there, and like each step I just chilled out a little bit. So I got myself calmed down. And then I said, "Oh, excuse me, would you like me to throw this out for you?" I said, "Oh, no, we'll throw it out." Because they knew they shouldn't be throwing trash on the ground. So if that's that, or I might say, I'll pretend it was you. I say, "Tammy, do you have a grandma?"
Yeah.
And you say, "What if it was her?" But you don't just figure this out in the moment. That's why you need to practice. I'll tell you another one, just since we have a little time. I was on the airplane, which I do a lot, right? And I was in one of those tiny planes that are 2x2, and I was in an emergency row. And the flight attendant comes, and you know they have to say, "Are you willing and able, blah, blah, blah." So he wanted to be cute, and it happened to be 4 men. So he made this really sexist comment, like, "If you guys willing not doing this, I'm sure we could find some women who are willing to do it." But the way he said it was like putting us down. And I was fuming. And when he came to give us the water, he said to me, "Is everything okay?" Because he could see like I was holding on to something. I said, "Yeah, everything's fine," because I had no clue what I was going to say. Then there was that moment when he was in the front reading the newspaper and he was sitting in the jump seat, and I decided I would pretend to go to the bathroom. So I walked up and I pretended I was going to the bathroom, and I said, "Excuse me, it seems like you would like to have a sense of humor about being a flight attendant." He was like, "Yeah, this is so boring. I have to say the same thing all the time." And he just explained why he likes to have this. I said, "That's so totally great. I'm bored all the time too. I'm glad that you do that." So I kind of like created an opportunity to relate to him because I didn't really have to go to the bathroom. But it was like that moment where he was sitting alone in the front and I could talk to him. And then I said, "That's great, but I'm curious, why did you make that comment about blah, blah, blah?" And he gave me some lame excuse. And I said, "I think what you're doing is totally great, but I wouldn't make that comment again because someone could interpret it as a sexist comment, and then they wouldn't want you to get in trouble." And then I had to pretend to go to the bathroom. But you see how this isn't really about collaboration, but it is because you all have to help each other figure out how are the different ways that you could respond to these situations that don't like have an obvious solution. And in those two situations, I was basically alone. But in most of the situations you're dealing with, there are many possible bystanders, and there are many possible people that could intervene. And you need to like work the situation to figure out the best person to intervene in the best way in the right time. So going back to your situation as a caregiver, if you're having a staff meeting and you're all talking about Sunday, it seems like Alan has a lot more money. And someone says, "Well, his brother's coming to visit next week." And then you talk about how you all going to tip my brother off without revealing anything confidential. And then you figure out who's the best person to do that. So that's the collaboration piece. And then one person does a good intervention. But if you really have the collaboration, you catalyze it, yes.
Okay, I'll throw out a situation that I encounter fairly regularly. Person in a nursing home. Person would like to go home.
They would like to go home?
They would like to go home. They need services in place to go home. The nursing home people don't think that the person should go home.
Is that because they want to have
Well,
a full bed and get more money, or they really shouldn't go home?
I'm attributing
question.
good. I'm attributing good motives
Okay,
that they.
but you're
they
open to
real-
the possibility that there are not always good motives.
Yeah,
Okay.
that, so, you know, I'm trying to assist the person going home, but these people are, that at the nursing home are thinking, no, he's not going to be healthy if he's home even with services, we need to keep him in. How do you collaborate when you're coming from two
You have to
different
sit down and talk to
perspectives
each
like
other,
this?
because I'll give you a real example. My daughter was a preemie. She spent her first 3 months in cross serving. And they didn't want to let her come home, and we wanted her to come home. So we said, what do we need to do so that she can come home? And in that case, there was a valid concern they had. She needed to have blood drawn all the time to monitor her liver, because preemies have liver issues. And she had such small veins that nobody could get a needle in there. So we found a doctor in Ithaca that could do it, and according to that, they let her come home. So that would be an example of collaboration. Now, if the nursing home knows something that you don't know, you need to know it. If you know something that they don't know, they need to know it. And if they're trying to make the bottom line and holding on to people longer than they should, then it's a different bystander intervention, right? Because then it's a little bit on the malpractice side. So you have to work the situation and get the information, and two different situations might have a different conclusion. One situation might be, oh, now I understand why I don't want to let that person home. And you let it go. Another situation might be, oh, now I want to, like take me. Now I understand why you don't want us to bring our daughter home, but we found this doctor that'll do what you need. Okay. And then a third, so you see, it's not one situation is all the same. But when you're in the collaborative, like maybe you don't know if what they're telling you is the truth. So you need to talk to a medical person. Because maybe what they're telling you isn't, you need a second opinion. So if you look at the bystander scenarios, which we could spend a lot of time on, because they're really what I call juicy, like they're really where the rubber hits the road. You see how the collaborative relationships give you the resources to navigate those and deal with those. Because each situation presents different challenges. And in some situations you need more information before you can, like such as, is the medical reason the nursing home given you legitimate? If it's not legitimate, now you need to make a bystander flow chart, right? Because you have all this great flow chart. If the reason that the nursing home was giving you is illegitimate, then then you need to intervene with the nursing home. If the reason the nursing home was giving you was legitimate, but you could provide an alternate solution, which is what we did with Rachel, my daughter, then you have a different scenario. But you might not know the alternate solution, or I might not know that there's a doorbell device that a hearing impaired person could hear. So the collaborative environment really feeds and empowers our ability to intervene effectively as bystanders. And it also identifies the bystander scenarios that we want to intervene in. So does that work?
So,
Do you have another example?
not off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Excuse me, I would like to collaborate with whoever said that at the end, because I'm a nursing home administrator, so I
Thank you.
get and so.
And we're not making any assumptions about nursing homes, but
No.
sometimes it could...
Right.
Okay, so you should jump, no, but it's a great scenario, so you should jump
So we can
in.
collaborate to help problem solve, so I'd love to have.
Okay, so go ahead, that's a great example.
Oh, we can do, I mean, we can do it later.
No, but do you want to say something
Oh,
now?
just, no, I agree, because the facilities do have to, under regulation, provide a discharge plan if the goal is to get them home. So maybe just reinforcing the regulatory component of it to get because a lot of social workers aren't understanding the discharge planning component of nursing homes. And they think that everybody has to be 100% when they leave, and that is not the fact anymore. So they just need a little prompting of regulation.
Okay, but that's a collaborative issue, right?
It's
So for example,
collaboration.
so
And
let
then
me,
getting the ombudsman involved, exactly, getting the ombudsman
I'll
involved
get
in
you.
the conversation to help that conversation.
so thank you. So let's say I'm a mental health professional, I'm a patient with you. Because I say, what's the problem? Like, and you need to give me some information that I didn't have that in order to do a comprehensive discharge requires this, and this, and you have laws that you have to comply with. And now if it's a situation where I can meet the need in the community that you are willing to provide in the nursing home, that may complicate the discharge planning more, because maybe now you have to verify that my daughter has a competent doctor who can take blood out of like a minuscule vein. So that's a perfect example of the need for collaboration, and you always assume goodwill. I mean, most nursing home administrators have really hard jobs, they're probably not getting paid enough, they're working long hours, and they really care. But of course there's some bad nursing homes, there's bad everything. There's a few bad everything of anything. So, but you assume you always start assuming goodwill and good intent, and you find out, so I ask you if I can meet with you, and they say, I don't understand why it's taking you so long to discharge people. And I'm a little obnoxious, say, are you holding out them and trying to make money? Then you just chill yourself out, and you say, well, Alan, let me explain to you the process. So this is actually a great example of collaboration in the room, because one part has information that the other part doesn't have.
Oh, no, I was just going to, just to add to that, that oftentimes that response that the nursing home might give is because it is the easiest way of dealing with it, because it can be very, very challenging to get somebody home, and getting all the services that a person may or may not need. So it's a very easy response to say, no, they can't, they have to be in 24-hour care. But
Right. Well, it's like
anybody with the right resources, no matter what their physical or mental status, could potentially live at home if they have the right resources.
Right, but it's like we'll all take the path of least resistance first.
Yes.
But so then it becomes a collaboration, so we could do a role play if we had time. We could be inside of a scenario, and I could say, well, what do you need to feel that it's safe for this person to go home? And you say, I need this, this, and this. And we could all do that, no problem. That's what we're designed to do. And I would say, well, I think this person would really rather be home, and their family wants a home. So let me see what I could work out, and then I come back to you and I say, here's what we came up with. And then you ask me a few questions. And then I realize there's a missing piece. So that's collaboration. But in many cases, all those resources aren't there, and the person needs to stay in the nursing home.
Absolutely.
But we need to know, we all need to know that so we don't get mad at you. Right? Because it's ignorance. We all don't, this is actually a great spontaneous example of the need for collaboration. Because we all don't know everything.
I was gonna say, it's not all, like, I know we're using the term collaboration, but part of it is also educating, because it's not always that you have to work together, it's just educating. But also the other part has to say, you have to say, I might not know the answer.
Well, that's
Being
the
humble enough to
humility
say,
part.
I don't know the
That's the
answer, let
humility
me go
part.
get it. It's
But
better
you
that
see,
way.
If you're my victim advocate and you know everything about me, you might get really worked up and think you know everything. But you know everything about me, but you don't know everything about the regulations.
Exactly.
So you need to know what you know and be humble about what you don't know.
That's why I said that's where education
But
comes
if you're,
in. 'Cause
if
nothing
you're willing
wrong
to get
with saying that.
arrested so you can get on the front page of the newspaper, it's like a whole different discussion, because that's a different stage.
Yeah.
But even if you say you need information, you need to have a collaborative environment in order for the information to be provided, but you personally might not have to go talk to the nursing home director. The nursing home directors may realize we need to offer a workshop for social workers to help them understand the regulatory process, and could we get Syracuse to provide CEUs for that, and we're going to give everybody a free lunch. You know, whatever you need, then you get people and they come to lunch and you give them the information.
Well, that's the part where you have to get so worked up where if you have to contact the ombudsman and say, look, you know, I've gone to a couple of nursing homes as a victim advocate, and you need to do some more education. We really need to have more education for not only the families, you know, but even the victims that are sitting
Right.
here.
But if I could politely correct you, I wouldn't say you need to do some more
Well-
education. I would say we need more education. Could you help
Yeah,
us?
it would be nice, instead of telling them what to do. I was thinking that as I said it.
No,
Excuse
but
me.
that's exactly it, because that's
Don't
why
want to
it
direct
was-
them necessarily.
That's why it was good that it was the big parking lot, right, when I did the garbage intervention, because I had a time to like chill out. And sometimes what you do, if you're really pissed at the nursing homes, then you come in my office and you just let it rip. like you say everything you would never say politely in public. And then you get it out of your system, and now your heartbeat goes down, and you start breathing calm, and now you go speak to the nursing home director. But that's another form of collaboration.
Oh, I just tend to write stuff, then you figure it out.
Letting us get it off our chest.
You know, I was just curious about the parking lot example, because the way you described it was a very adequate solution, but I think what some people fear is if you go and you confront these people about, the way you said you would, and then they give you a negative reaction to that, then what do you do? You know, like,
Then you deal with the negative reaction. So I'll give you another scenario. The airplane also, right? So same thing, I'm sitting in the airplane, and some guys 3 rows behind me are talking across the aisle so loud, people 3 rows ahead of me are turning around. So I turn around and I say, excuse me, I pretend I'm really meek and timid. I say, excuse me, do you know that everyone in the airplane can hear you? And he goes, well, what do you expect? If you're in an he like, if you're in an airplane, what do you expect? Of course. And it was like, okay, I'm really sorry, I'm not, are you telling us what to do? I said, no, I would never tell you what to do. I would never tell you what to do. I'm just telling you that most people can hear you. And if you don't mind, that's up to you. And then I turned around and they started whispering. Now, it gets complex because there might be safety issues. There's all these issues. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying the more practice that you have and the more you are able to work the angles and the more information you have, such as, well, why don't we get this new doorbell that, vibrates or something, and the other, then we could step in, and before we wouldn't have stepped in. And the collaboration piece is a big part that empowers the bystander piece. Because let me give you a different scenario. Maybe the social workers and the care people are really frustrated with the nursing homes. And maybe the nursing homes are really frustrated with Albany because they've been trying to change the legislation for 10 years and they haven't been able to get anywhere. And now instead of the nursing home having the social workers angry at them, the social workers put all their activism behind changing the law. That's collaboration. But if I don't know why you're so slow, in my opinion, then I'm not going to handle it right. So you can't avoid the collaborative piece, but we live in a culture in which people don't collaborate and are not encouraged to collaborate. I mean, even go to Syracuse or any university, and we have very little cross-disciplinary collaboration. Look at the medical system, how fragmented it is.
I just saw Donna's for trying to get her hand in there.
The only thing is, excuse me, Donna,
We got
I only
4
have
minutes.
3 more minutes left, so would you?
It'll be very brief.
Okay.
I just want to say, in terms of collaboration and social justice, us community leaders and community partners need to know when to step back to let somebody else step up, because we don't know everything, and nobody owns a particular issue, so education never stops, so you can't come and say, well, I've been dealing with this issue for 25 years, and I know more than you know. Sometimes we have to know when to step back and let
Thank
somebody
you.
else step up.
There you go.
Amen. We need your help. No, I'll tell you what's happening in the sexual assault field. In the sexual assault field, you have a great thing happening with a huge empowerment of victims and a huge voice being given to victims before Me Too. But in some states like California, now the legislators are going to the victims to ask them what we should be doing in prevention, and they don't know what they're talking about. They know the gaps in the system about victim care and response, but they're not the right people to ask what to do, but they think they know. So it's an example of what you're saying. So it's like we have to know where we belong and what we can do and what we don't do. Okay. Ensure that programs span the ecological model, and we're almost done. What would a comprehensive elder abuse prevention and response program look like? What would you need to change in order for this to happen? I need to go talk to some nursing home directors to find out why I think they're so slow, or whatever. Or we need to meet every month and work cases, right? And 1 month we work a discharge case. How would you go about making this a reality over time? Because it won't happen all at once. What are your personal goals in terms of relationship building? And I would also add, what are your triggers? Like what pushes your button? Yes?
I just want to say, over this whole nursing home issue too, I think if there's a bigger environment where we don't have good supports for people in the community, and the nursing home is limited by the supports that the person can get when they're discharged.
Right.
Oh, no doubt about that.
So like I don't think I said this yet about my wife being from Brazil. They don't have, did I say that here?
You said it real well.
This is the third time. No. So, in the US, the way we understand family may cause us to over-rely on nursing homes. And maybe if we thought about family differently and provided family more resources, more families could support their elders. But in Brazil, it's the opposite. The way they understand family is you get trapped in these dependency, guilt-ridden relationships where you feel you're a bad person. I mean, I had a really good friend, our friend who was Brazilian, and his mother was really mentally ill and irresponsible, and he couldn't allow himself to say no to her. And it was part personal, but it was very cultural. So we need to look at all these layers. That's why that original, in the keynote, I should have put it in here, that diagram with all the circles.
Right.
You need to look at all the circles and what each piece is contributing and how they all fit together and get them lined up so they're working together. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.